Good morning. This is Mike Houston with your Friday morning weather hazard briefing for southeast Idaho. Looking at satellite imagery this morning, we have a low pressure system ejecting northeast across the Wyoming border here with associated precipitation. We'll show that here in a minute. And looking further upstream, you can see the next low pressure system, which should be taking shape here over Vancouver Island this afternoon. And then further off the coast, we see the next storm system, which will come into play sometime over the weekend. And that will set up off the northwest coast again. We'll see that here in the forecast graphics as we work through them. Looking at regional radar loop this morning, we have some lingering precipitation with that ejecting low here across the Driggs region, and that will be exiting east of the border here sometime early this morning with drier conditions working in from the west. Looking at our 10-hour dead fuel moistures, we see marginal conditions here across southwest Idaho, and you have to get back down into southern Nevada here to start seeing some critical readings on the 10-hour dead fuel moistures. So we'll continue to monitor that. Our fuel status across the region generally approaching critical conditions here on our ERCs here across a number of areas, but haven't reached critical condition yet. Jumping to our forecast maps this morning, we see that low pressure system this afternoon working off into the Dakotas. And there's some lingering shower activity here along the divide in Montana. We may see some of that here from Idaho, but for the most part, we're expecting dry conditions across a good chunk of southeast Idaho. There is looks to be maybe some weak disturbances embedded in the cyclonic flow around this low, so that might help to trigger some sort of shower and thunderstorm activity across the Salmon Chalice late this afternoon and evening. In fact, that activity will likely continue into the nighttime. Looking at the forecasted high temperatures for today, generally in the upper 70s to mid 80s here within the Snake River Plain, mid 60s and 70s in the Central Mountains, some of these valley locations jumping up to about 80 degrees. And then across the southeast highlands, generally in the 70s. As I mentioned previously, with some weak disturbances in the southwest flow, we may see some ongoing shower activity across the Salmon Chalice overnight. And that's what this model is depicting here through the nighttime with that low pressure system now squarely over Vancouver Island. Things don't change much for Saturday. That low remains here near Seattle. We're at the mercy of embedded systems in this southwest flow, triggering isolated to scattered thunderstorm activity primarily up here along the Montana border. Might even see something, as the model is indicating, down here in the Snake River Plain with a weak impulse that may be going through. Those conditions continue into Sunday. What we are seeing is that low now is beginning to make its move towards the east along the Canadian border. That'll bring a lot of that dynamics into the Central Mountains in terms of helping to support scattered shower and thunderstorm activity there through the day on Sunday. Might even see some isolated cells down here into the Snake River Plain. Certainly we'll see breezy conditions across the region. Temperatures warming on Sunday into the 80s under that warm southwest flow here in the Snake River Plain, and upper 60s and 70s and maybe even lower 80s here in some of these lower valley locations in the Central Mountains. Southeast Highlands will do fairly well as well, climbing up into the low to mid 80s. As I mentioned, some wind with that system as it begins to push east along the Canadian border. Here we are depicting wind gusts Saturday afternoon in the 25 to 30 mile per hour range, some higher amounts even here across some of these higher elevation peaks, but generally a breezy day here on Sunday. You see that low pressure system continuing to progress east here on Monday, reaching northwest Montana. We'll see associated precipitation spreading in along the Montana border into the Island Park and eastern Highland regions. Maybe even see some isolated cells back into the central mountains here near Sun Valley. Should be another breezy day as well. Temperatures probably cooling a bit. Here we are looking at highs now, generally in the lower 80s and maybe even upper 70s here in the Snake River Plain. Squarely in the 60s here in the central mountains, and maybe some upper 70 to lower 80 degree range temperatures here in these lower valleys. Southeast highlands generally in the 70s. And as I mentioned, probably some wind still lingering across the region as that low is working its way into northwest Montana. But certainly breezy here in the Snake River Plain and central mountains, where we see wind gusts generally in the 20 to 30, 35 mile per hour range across that region. Skipping ahead to Tuesday now, as I showed yesterday, that high pressure ridge beginning to develop through Colorado and Wyoming and up into Montana, as that next low pressure system that was well off the northeast coast begins to make its way towards Washington State. So that ridge will develop across the region, still remaining east of the divide, so will mainly be under the influence of this southwest flow, and certainly by the later portion of the week, we'll start to see some energy ejecting from this low across the region, and probably giving us some scattered shower activity across mainly the mountains, possibly the Snake Plains. That's all I had for you here this morning. If you had any comments or questions, you can give us a call here at the number on the screen. Thank you.